This week, we welcome Christopher Gates from Valentium for an interview to discuss medical device secure development lifecycle. In the leadership and communications segment, 5 reasons why cybersecurity should be a priority while planning your business. 3 key takes that help me work way less and accomplish more. Everything you need to know about dictionary attacks. Is misinformation slowing SASE adoption? And more. Business Security Weekly without Matt Alderman starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 210, recorded on March 22nd, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I am not Matt Alderman. I am Paul Sidorian. Matt Alderman is on vacation. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Jason, welcome.
Paul, Matt-free Monday, huh?
Is Matt,
Strange.
Everyone needs a vacation.
Good for him. Good for him.
Mr. Adrian Sanabria is here with us as well. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, thanks. I'm also not Matt Alderman.
That's right. That is right. If you have a specific guest or topic that you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, please submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete that form, and we do review those on a regular basis. Our next live webcast will be on April 29th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where you will learn how to prepare for modern ransomware attacks. I guess Aces wish they had seen that already. securityweekly.com/webcast to register today. /on-demand gets you the archive of all of our webcast and technical training. Chris Gates is here with us. He is currently the Director of Product Security at Valentium. Chris has more than 40 years of experience developing medical equipment. He's been on a mission to raise the level of cybersecurity in the medical device industry. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are a different Chris Gates than the one I thought of when they said Chris Gates was coming on the show. Oh, different namespace collision.
Exactly. And in fact, that's why I go by Christopher.
Okay, is it Christopher?
To avoid the other Chris.
Gotcha. We will go by Christopher. I see Burgundy reads what was on the teleprompter, so we got lazy typing on the teleprompter. So, Christopher, tell us a little bit about how you got started in security and specifically medical device security.
Well, I've been a medical device developer now it's getting closer and closer to 50 years. I don't even like to talk about that. Mostly class 3 medical devices, things that if they stop working, you stop working. So I've got 6 ventilators developed in my career that I worked on and lots of other projects. But even before I did that, I've always been into security side of things. As a child, I used to go out and sit at the bike racks in the elementary school and pick locks and combos and warded and pinned locks and open them all up, then close them back up. I wasn't stealing bikes. I just wanted the challenge, which is obviously one of those bad signs that you're going to turn out to be a hacker in life. And certainly I still use that actually and hire people for my department if they've got lock picking skills. So it always works out well. But over the years developing medical devices, I used it to do protection of my own products, especially where something like there was a consumable and a durable part of the medical device, and you want to make certain somebody didn't counterfeit your consumable part. Likewise, looking at a competitor's product and reverse engineering it. as far as pulling out algorithms and stuff like that out of the code and taking a look at it. So all of this played in repeatedly over the years. And then starting about 13 years ago, I was at a large medical device manufacturer doing some consultant work for their low power RF. That was a proprietary system that they were using on a body area network for a medical device. And they got hacked. And they were like, what do we do with this? And I said, well, I could tell you. And they're like, well, what do you know about it? And it's, well, I've been a hacker for decades. And that started me on an interesting journey in the sense that hacking is fun. You can feel superior because somebody didn't do a good job of it. And, it's a great little rush for you. But really what's challenging is then trying to combine being an engineer with a hacker, figuring out how to incorporate that into the normal processes and development. How do you train other engineers? Because it's a completely different way of thinking. And how do you incorporate this into that life cycle so it is just another thing that has to be tracked, managed as part of a development operation? It was fascinating for me. Talk about rewarding, because it was so challenging to figure out new methods and approaches to getting this into the development life cycle, and also educating and changing the culture with the engineering staff. So that has since, I've left them after quite a few years of being with them as a consultant, and then went on and joined Valentium to build up the department here. And that's what I've done. We've built up a nice group of engineers who I bring from all different walks of life, hardware engineers, firmware engineers, mobile device engineers, and we bring them in and I train them, because you can't hire these people. In the IT world for cybersecurity, it is extremely difficult to hire good help. We all know this. It's huge. Every stat you see is huge shortfalls. In the embedded sphere, which is different in a lot of regards than an IT environment, it's impossible. Literally, you can count all the good people on one hand in this industry, and we all know each other. So I have to grow them. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm on this 5-year quest to go through and not only train my own people, but train medical device manufacturers, MDMs, their staff in how to do this so they can do security on their own. They don't need people like me and my people, that this is just baked into the process. And I'm doing this through a couple of different means, like the book that you see on the wallpaper behind you here. That's oddly the first and only book on medical device cybersecurity. Do you believe that at this late date? And also we've stood up a training seminar, a 3-tiered approach to training. So you can send in your engineers and I'll give you back cybersecurity experts who can actually do this in your product design.
Yeah.
So Christopher,
go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you said something that really piqued my interest, right? Because in many instances with secure SDLC, and I'm sure in the medical device realm, there's their own nuances, but many times there's best practices, right? I think sometimes the most difficult thing is creating the culture. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the difficulties, the challenges, and maybe some of the techniques you use within an organization that's not typically security centric to really change that culture? Because that's where I'm seeing a lot of fellow CISOs and security executives running into some brick walls, right? That culture change is sometimes the most difficult piece to really make headway on.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, it is. And in fact, it is gating in certain regards. So if you go into an organization where the senior leadership team doesn't see a need for, or thinks it's an unnecessary overhead, don't even bother, literally. In fact, if you work at that organization, start looking for your next job, because they're probably making other major mistakes for the organization as well. So you do have to have the SLT buy-in. If you don't have that, you're just not going to make any traction at all. And then the next step are things like the engineering staff that thinks, well, I hear on a monthly basis, once I compile my code, nobody can read it. Okay. So introducing them to, disassemblers and decompilers is always an amazing thing. And actually, I've incorporated this approach into the training seminars, and that the first level one thing I do is I spend a day teaching them how to be a hacker. And I'm doing it all with products that are included in the kit with the class that are cheap, $20 to $40 USB-based products that I do things like software-defined radio, reverse engineering, breaking in, doing hardware side channel analysis, side channel attacks on these things to extract keys. And the reason is because it opens their eyes. First, you just absolutely scare the crap out of them. And they come through and look at this and go, wow, I can do this. I've learned how to do this in minutes. I can do it for almost no money. And this is the stuff I'm incorporating in my next product. And that's part of what I always tell my students is, now take this back. And you're working on a project right now? Yes. All right. Go back to that first, prototype board you're working on. Start attacking that board. Use what I've taught you here to see how easy it breaks. These are the cheap tools that people are using. These aren't even the expensive ones. These aren't even the difficult ones that's going to take, days or weeks to attack your system. These are things that are going to be done in minutes. That sort of opens their eyes. So the engineering staff is the easy ones. The senior leadership, if they don't buy into it, they're just not going to for any reason. You can try fear, uncertainty, and doubt and FUD. You can try showing them current events. You can try showing them companies that have been devastated by this. They don't want to do it. And there's literally nothing you can do to help them.
Yeah. I mean, at some point when it comes to senior leadership, there is that tipping point, right? I mean, for me, it's always worth having the good old college try, right? Because you can change some minds, you can change some hearts, but you're absolutely right. If you're in a career where over a long period of time, you're realizing you don't have the support of executive leadership, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So
yeah,
absolutely.
They're being willfully ignorant. If you can go through life today and not be aware of the risk that's getting posed by cyber attacks, then there's something seriously wrong there. They're trying not to address this.
Sure.
And
I would argue even negligent, because the state that we're in these days, I would argue negligent.
Yeah. And don't think that's not going to be a thing coming up as far as legal liability goes. If you're not doing best practice, if you're thinking nobody's going to attack me, because why would they? Or I just don't want to deal with it, or I just want to put my product in the marketplace. I've seen this done now over and over again. The good news is the FDA is getting pretty darn good about filtering those people out. And I usually get them after they've gotten rejection notices back from the FDA. And they come back and they go, well, we don't know what to do. What does this mean? And it's like, some of them still try to say, well, we don't need to do this. I go, well, yeah, you kind of actually have to do that if you're going to get a pre-market approval for your medical device. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of a thing that they're now seeing as they're in some cases reluctantly coming to us. In some cases, they're not even coming to us and are getting really destroyed as far as releasing a new product.
So that's a good lead into one of the questions I had written down here. What is the current state of regulation and fines there, and is it effective? Is that enough incentive?
Ooh, you commingle two things there. Let me talk about the first part of it here, which is fines. No, and in fact, all of the regulatory actions over the last 4 years have, I forget the reduction, but it was like 80-90%, have been reduced in ongoing regulatory actions due to the administration that was in power at the time. Now with this new one, I expect we'll start to see that change and go back to more of an acceptable level of ongoing enforcement. Where the big gatekeeper is, though, with medical devices is in the pre-market approval. Unlike other industries, before you can put your medical device on the marketplace, you have to get the FDA to approve it. And there's two major paths through that called a 510K and a pre-market approval, a PMA. PMAs can take many, many years. 510Ks are much, much, much quicker, only a couple of months. And they're based upon the patient risk. They're based upon existing products that are similar in nature that have already done the hard work ahead of time. So all this can be submitted in, but you have to go through that. And in all cases, the FDA has now stated quite clearly where their expectations lie. Back in 2014, they came out with this document called Guidance for Pre-Market Submissions for Cybersecurity. A terrible document. It said, make your medical devices secure. We like puppies, unicorns are cute, and gave you no explicit details as to what their expectations were. And that's what you're expecting out of an FDA guidance document is, what is it you're looking for, especially in an emergent property like cybersecurity was for medical devices in 2014. So Nobody lined up to it. Because there wasn't anything to align to. The 2016, they kicked out a post-market ongoing surveillance, which was a much better document, and started getting into this. Then in 2018, they came out with a first draft of a new spin on the pre-market document. And that one laid out everything. And at the time, I had talked to Dr. Suzanne Schwartz of the FDA, and she says, we thought they'd get it. And it's like, no, you've got to spell out what your expectations are. And this one did. This document did. And there's even going to be a new spin on it here later this year where they clean up some of the formatting. But it's a much better document in the sense that they talk about things like your total product lifecycle, how you're supposed to look at, design vulnerabilities during your design phase. And during implementation, you're going to be going through and doing fuzz testing and penetration testing and unit boundary testing on all your code. And you're going to be looking at this, and then you're going to be looking at your third-party software components that you're using, your libraries, your frameworks, your operating systems, communication stacks, and known vulnerabilities in them. So you're not going to release a product that has known vulnerabilities in these third-party software components. Likewise, you're going to monitor those for the life of this product, which in medical devices is 10 to 20 years. They got long lives. And make certain if there's any disclosures against any of those third-party software components, you address them. You certainly assess them and see if they impact your system. And if they do, you come up with patches, workarounds, recalls.
So that's that. You've gone right into my other big question was, it seems to me the elephant in the room here is that development life cycles are long in this industry. So how important is it for medical device manufacturers to get it right in the first pass? And how, on a scale of never to infinity, impossible is it to get firmware updated on 100% of these devices once they're already out in the field?
Oh, you ask good questions. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. My son, he's a grown man now, but he was running a group doing alpha testing for a first-person shooter game. Natural Selection 2 is what it was called. And one day I walked in and watched him doing this as he was running it, and he had these teams up playing, and it's all written in Lua. And as they found things, they were stopping, fixing it, restarting the game, and it was all going on dynamically. Bugs in their lifespan were occupied seconds. In the medical device industry, it's a religion. we lovingly look at that bug and we go, oh, this isn't right. And we put it in a database and we talk about it and we hold meetings and we have review cycles. And some months later, we get around to writing a line of code or erasing a line of code and fixing that bug. And I looked at that and said, well, there's a happy medium somewhere in between those two. Yes, the design life cycles can typically take a year and a half. I've seen it take multiple years in a complex medical device or a dysfunctional organization, but it is extremely difficult to do. We go through, we plan out everything ahead of time. Everything is analyzed, everything is reviewed completely from the user interface to the algorithms to the system level design and decomposition. It is an extremely rigorous process that doesn't show up in other disciplines, certainly like gaming, okay, or even mobile device development. That's something where Valentium differentiates itself. We do all this engineering for our clients, or any part of it you need, from firmware and production testers and system level design and mobile app development. And that's one of the things that differentiates our mobile app is you can get a lot of people to write mobile apps, but to write one that is actually that tied down, that reviewed, it's a much higher quality level of mobile app, and security, of course, that's a whole different topic. But just getting there takes so much more oversight. So yes, it's a very slow process. Getting out patches, the post-market guidance that I made reference to earlier says that from the medical device manufacturer's awareness of a vulnerability, you have 60 days to release a patch or workaround for your product. I'm only aware, and that's been out there now since 2016. So I'm only aware of one company, a very large medical device manufacturer, that actually has done that. Everybody else takes much, much longer. Nobody has lined up with that yet. In fact, one of the worst ones I saw was 18 months to deliver a patch for really nasty vulnerability.
Christopher, when you started, when we talked about medical devices, talked about the different classes, when I think of going into a medical setting of any kind, and I think about all the different devices that are involved, there are certainly many classes, right? There's monitoring, there's life support, there's imaging, or three that I can come up with off the top of my head. How do the standards and guidelines in the FDA define different levels of security and some of the things we've talked about in this interview for each of those classes, or are they classified differently?
So, quite correct. They are broken up into classifications, class 1 being the least level of concern, class 3 being the most. Implantables, ventilators, those type of things are class 3s. Then you have a lot of class 2s and stuff like that that are much lower level of concern. Infusion pumps for diabetics, for instance, that kind of thing, as long as they're not connected. So there is these different classifications. As to how that aligns to the cybersecurity, the FDA's charter that they were given by the FDA is to enforce safety and efficacy of the medical devices. You might notice the distinct lack of anything talking about cybersecurity there. They have kind of drawn a dotted line between safety and cybersecurity, but it even goes farther than that. And hopefully this will get amended here now with this new administration, where the FDA gets a more direct mandate for cybersecurity. So let me put it to you this way. You're sitting in a hospital and in a hospital bed, and you've got the requisite pole-mounted infusion pump next to you with a bag of ringers on it, and it's infusing into you. And then somebody attacks and uses that pump as a pivot point into the network. Your infusion's still fine. He hasn't messed with the flow or volume of what you're being infused with. But now he's using this to step out into the rest of that network segment, and maybe he's attacking ventilators or imaging systems or diagnostic systems. How do you align that with the FDA's charter? It's very difficult because it's not affecting the safety and efficacy of the patient being infused, but it is the greater whole of security. So to a large degree, the FDA is saying, we're not going to tie this to a classification or a risk classification. We're instead going to put the ball in your court and say, how is it this can't be a problem? Are you doing good practices here? Are you doing threat modeling or vulnerability assessments during design phase? Are you doing fuzz testing? Are you doing penetration testing, boundary testing of your code? Are you doing all these things and looking at them and analyzing them? Because that's going to get us a lot of the way there. And it's not so much the direct risk of that device causing a problem as it is what that device can do for other devices around it.
So speaking of that, how common is it for medical devices these days to have like a clinical and a maintenance mode? Because I've seen, especially in some of the infusion pumps, them moving more towards this model where you can actually lock the device down to where there's very little you can do with it when it's in clinical mode, which seems like a great model, since the vast majority of the time the device is going to be in clinical mode, doesn't need to be managed or updated or anything like that. So just shut all that down. But then, of course, the challenge there is getting people to use it, right?
Well, yeah, there's that. But you at least, if you don't give them that capability, they can't use it. So as a medical device manufacturer, the onus is on us to give them those tools and actually to make those tools default, make them work if they're trying to make it insecure in its use. So there's only so far we can go with that, but you're quite correct. Doing least privilege is part of the analysis. So as you have multiple roles, so you look at this and say, I've got an implantable neurostimulator, okay? Well, think about that. That's going to be implanted. The surgeon has to have certain capabilities that he's going to use in an operating theater to put the electrodes into and align it properly to whatever he's attaching to. All right, he's going to have to do certain testing and configuration and calibration at that point. Then as you go out to the healthcare provider, he's going to have certain programs that he's going to set up into the thing and control. Then maybe you've got a caregiver who needs to look at that and see what the battery level is or see the treatment is being administered. Maybe the patient has another one. Maybe there's a remote patient, especially if it's juvenile, and you've got parents who are monitoring this. So all of those roles have to be defined up front. And then in those roles, you isolate what functionality is needed for each one of those and enforce least privilege because of that. and say, no, I'm not going to give you this capability to, turn the electrodes on full blast and cause tissue damage. It's just not going to happen. Now, maybe you can have that level of control in a theater setting, but when it's being implanted, but that's not for a patient, that's not for a healthcare provider, that's not going to be for a caregiver.
That's super hard though.
All these roles.
I hope it's better than, like, let's just say my e-bike, where I found a post on Reddit that got me into the advanced menu and told me what the PIN code was to change the safety settings.
But what was the mistake they made there? They made one PIN code.
Yeah.
You don't ever create a function that allows you to increase your attack surface. So if I go over, and I'm not going to hold up a medical device because there's too much of that. Here, I'll hold up a Bluetooth ball. Okay. This is a medical device, and I've got access into that to provide those different roles. The next Bluetooth ball that comes along cannot have that same level of control, because if I can increase my attack surface to all of them, then that's horrible. Killing one patient is bad, or harming them. Killing all the patients out there is unconscionable. You can't do it. Can't allow it to happen. So there are ways that you have to set it up so that each one of these things is unique in how you perform your authentication and subsequent authorization for these capabilities and these different roles. You can't have one PIN to do it, because you're right. It'll be published into Service Tech or Reddit or wherever.
And California passed a law. I know it applied to consumer IoT devices, like home routers
medical.
And things like that. Not medical devices? Okay.
Not medical. That being said, I don't let any of my clients get away with it either.
Priorities, ventilators or, home routers.
Well, it doesn't matter. If you can cause harm with this thing, if it's anything more than a tongue depressor, you really have a moral obligation to do this. Also, by the way, this is a competitive advantage. We keep talking about the negative side of it. You can kill people, you can harm people. But this is a competitive advantage. If you can go in and say, my medical device is more secure than my competitor, and here's some artifacts I've created, what we call an MDS2, which a 300 and some odd questionnaire about your secure development process, a software bill of materials that addresses all of your third-party software components in a machine-readable format. Those kind of things are really, really good, because you don't have to stand there and go, we are totally secure, nobody can hack us, because that's kind of stupid to say stuff like that. Instead, you're giving artifacts that say, we have a mature security development process here. We have this stuff. We're trying to make you feel better. And in fact, if there's contracts, we'll talk about the contract language and how we're going to support you from now on. And if you have a problem or a breach, here's points of contact. Here's how quickly we'll respond to you and try to keep your facility up. I saw here the ad here at the beginning of this session that's talked about the evolving sense of ransomware. How long do you think it's going to be until they start to target medical devices? Right now, all the ransomware, and it has evolved tremendously. It's huge business. If anybody thinks it's dysfunctional teenagers in their basement, think again. This is a hundreds of billions of dollars per annum business, and they treat it that way, like a year-over-year return on their investment. Well, PCs are increasingly getting more and more hardened, more and more hard to really do damage to that you can't undo. From backing them up to creating SIMs and to creating monitoring systems. All of this is capable. But in the case of medical devices, they frequently don't have the resources to do this. They do not have the capability to have any sort of agent implanted on them, for the vast majority of them, that aren't PC-based. And they're usually fairly easy to hack. I mean, the vast majority of them out there that have been there for decades, if it takes me more than 30 minutes to hack one of these things and thus hack all of them, I'm getting slow. So this is the kind of thing that when you look at this, you go, this is a huge risk sitting out there to your organization. Instead, figure out ways to ensure this is not going to be a problem for your organization going forward. Take the risk out of your organization, get the partners like the medical device manufacturers to assist you with this, and share that responsibility with people who can really help you. And so that's a lot of what we see going forward here is those are going to be the successful medical device companies for the next 10 years, are the ones who understand their customers are scared, they need help, they need a way to address this. And so when you go in for pre-procurement of a new medical device, these are important things. I already know of hospitals right now that if they ask you when they're looking for a new say, infusion pump or whatever, ventilator. And they say, do you have an MDS squared and a software bill of materials? And you go, we'll make one for you. They go, we're already not interested in doing business with you. They're looking for that as an indication of maturity of the security in your development process. And if you don't have it, you probably have other mistakes too.
Yeah, Christopher, I mean, you literally, took the words out of my mouth when you said shared responsibility, because that is the recipe for success, right? It's a shared responsibility between the client and the manufacturer to make sure both sides of the aisle are doing the right thing, with ultimately the support coming from the manufacturer to guide best practices and help that organization get to a secure posture, because without that relationship, neither side is going to be successful.
Right. And so you as a consumer, in this case, a hospital, say, you're starting to realize this is your problem. And there are literally hospitals that, out in the middle of Ohio, that the person who sets up their network and configures PCs is their gardener. Okay, I'm not kidding about this. I'm north of Denver, Colorado, and up in Estes Park, there's a hospital there that has a very small staff as well, too. This is very common. Not everybody's a Mayo. Mayo has hundreds of security analysts that they can throw on things, and they do pen testing all of their own against new products before they configure them and put them in place. Mayo is its own wonderful thing, but there's a huge range out there, these end users, and some of them will do really bad practices just because they don't know enough. So the more they can get help from a medical device manufacturer, the more that MDM can increase their market and their sales because of that hand-holding that maybe a larger company doesn't give them.
Christopher, you have a book, right? Is that published? People can go check it out?
It is indeed. Medical device cybersecurity, as I mentioned, the first and only book on medical device cybersecurity. It is from Artec House Publishing. I'll tell you a funny story. My co-author, Axel Worth, who I should put his name up here, another veteran expert in there. Jason Smith, who was our tech writer at Valentium, and myself were going to write this book. And we had done the outline and the table of contents for this whole thing of what we were going to do, and we're all set to do it. Well, about this time, Artec Publishing House out of London came to Axel and I said, hey, Axel, we've seen you did another document here, another book from Amy that was good, that was targeted toward health practitioners. We'd like to do one targeted toward medical device manufacturers. And so he said, great, yeah, I'll work on that. So Axel came to me and said, hey, Chris, how would you like to write a book with me, co-write a book? And I started laughing, and literally it was on Google Drive. I pulled it up and shared it with him on a Zoom conference call and said, well, here it is. We've started it. So we sent that into them, and Artec loved it and came back and said, great, we want 20% more. And I'm like, I'm not quite certain where that comes from, but I thought we covered everything. So we also then included a great raft of contributing authors who worked with us. Greg Garcia of the Health Sector Coordinating Council, Alan Friedman of the Department of Commerce, NTIA, Michelle Jump of MedSec, Michael McNeil, ex of Philips, and some great leading lights. These are some of the best people out there in industry because of, like I said, we know everybody. They contribute a lot of good information to our book. So it was really nice to see.
Fantastic.
And as I told Artec House, this book is going to be out of date in 3 years. We're going to have to write a second volume.
Second edition coming up, right?
Exactly, because as the rate our business changes,
that's it.
Nothing stays static.
Well, I encourage our listeners to check out the book. Christopher, thank you so much for appearing on Business Security Weekly today.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back with the leadership and communication articles for the week. Stay tuned.